Jacob, are you there?
Yeah, I am here. Good morning, everybody. Let's see. Scott, can you hear me?
I can. I just wanted to make sure everything was still working here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I see 8:59. We got one more minute.
Hey, Jacob, this is Ron. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Ron, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Just want to let you know, I've got a conference call with the secretary between 9:30 and 9:45. So as soon as I get through, I'll have to jump off.
Okay. We might have you go maybe right after Mikhail.
Yeah,
Mikhail, you got a lot. You have a lot of updates.
no, truthfully, I don't have anything really. I was just gonna welcome everybody. I can turn it over to Ron pretty
Are you
quickly.
okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Ron?
Yeah, that's
We're kind
fine.
of done. Jason can talk. Jason can talk after Ron. Okay. Let's see. It's nice. So 9 o'clock. Go ahead and mute. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and kick it off. Good morning, everybody. Transportation planners around the state. And this is the April statewide transportation planning meeting. We got snow on the ground in Frankfort, which is interesting today. It was like, I don't know, 70, 80 degrees out yesterday. But anyway, as long as everybody's got a warm place to stay this morning, it should be good. Should be a good meeting. This meeting was set up to kind of response to the survey from the last one. It seems like people have been asking for a while to hear some public involvement during this COVID stuff, and then some resources for socioec, that kind of things for public outreach. So let's see, a few housekeeping notes. Everybody's muted. We're recording the meeting to preserve the educational efforts of the speakers, and you can unmute yourself if you're speaking, and if just let me know when you're done. I guess when you're speaking, let me know when you're done, and I'll help you field questions and that kind of thing. I'll watch the chat box. I think everybody knows how these work. If you don't, send me a chat or an email or something. Okay, let's see. Anything else housekeeping wise? I think that's it. We'll go ahead and kick it off. We've got a full agenda today. I know Ron's got a meeting. He said he has a meeting at 9:30 with the secretary. So we'll go ahead and kick it off with Mikhail Pelfrey. I'll go ahead and read the bios of Mikhail, Jason, and Ron, so they can just share when they're ready to talk. So Mikhail Pelfrey joined KYTC in 2006, rural municipal aid, and he's worked his way up. 2020, he's now the director of the division of planning, and he's a proud graduate of UK. He received his bachelor's in civil engineering, lives in Lexington with his wife Sagan, and boys Lyndon and Charleston. Jason Blackburn has been working for the Department of Highways for over 20 years, most of which has been in District 10. And in December 2020, Jason took on the role of Assistant Director of Planning to help the shift stuff. So he'll talk on that a little bit this morning. And then Mr. Ron Rigney is the Transportation Engineering Director for the Division of Program Management. So we get a lot of updates, that kind of thing, for keeping everything funded and going. So without further ado, Mikhail, if you get any updates, go ahead and kick off with whatever you'd like to share. Muted. Let me.
You're good, Mikhail.
Sorry about that.
Mikhail, unmute yourself there. I don't know what you said.
I was gonna. Sorry about that. Just gonna welcome everybody to the April SEP meeting. This is actually in April. I'm looking at my window. One might think this is in January, but it's snow on the ground here in Lexington, and in fact, we do have a full agenda today. going to switch things up. Ron's got a meeting with the secretary at 9:30, and let's go ahead and cover his material real quickly, and then we will provide some short updates on shift. But as of in terms of director's notes, I really don't have too much for today. As Jake was saying, we have a full agenda. So, Ron, I'll just turn it over to you at this time. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Mikhail. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, I got up this morning and surprised, like everyone else, seeing our ground is completely covered. It's truly attracting snow for the 21st of April. That's unusual, but anyway, we'll get started here. Just want to go over a few things here, just to update people on a couple of things that we've got going on that we're working with the secretary and the state highway engineer's office. And I know Jason will be covering the shift prioritization process, but one thing I wanted to update you all on, that I'm sure that people have been hearing that there's potential for congressional earmarks may be back on the table. The Congress is looking into those possibilities. And we as a cabinet, we have been working with the congressional members. And what we have been doing is we have been providing them a list of projects from the 2020 highway plan that they might consider as projects to seek potential earmarks for federal highway funding. But again, please keep in mind that, you know, there's no guarantees that earmark funding will ever come to be. That still has to go through the entire earmark process, has to go through congressional approval. You know, ultimately it would have to be voted on by both chambers and then eventually signed into law by the president before that could ever come to be. So with that said, we just want everyone to pursue the shift prioritization process for those projects that maybe the congressmen have decided to seek potential earmarks, because there's no guarantee. And we don't want someone sitting here in November after the shift processes went through its entire prioritization process, and all of a sudden they say, well, wait a minute here, we thought we was going to get a congressional earmark, and that project didn't go through the prioritization process. So please, for any of the projects that the congressman may be seeking potential earmarks, please continue with those through the shift prioritization process. Because again, I can't overstress that there's no guarantees that the earmark process would come to be. And even if the earmark process is approved by Congress, there's no guarantees that those projects might receive earmark funding. So don't miss the opportunity of the shift prioritization process for those projects. The other thing Mikhail, I'd like to update just on the STIP. We are working on the draft 2021 STIP, and we're hoping to have that ready to begin the 30-day public review comments 1st of May. And we anticipate having the final approval of the 21 STIP submitted and approved by FHWA and FTA by October the 1st of this year. So that's just a general schedule on that. The other thing that I just want to touch base on real quickly is the COVID-19 relief funding, the CRISA funding that was announced. There's funding for the OKI area, a little over $3 million, the Henderson area, a little over $272,000, the Ashland area, almost $540,000, the Lexington area about $2.8 million, and the KIPT area almost $8 million. With those, please keep in mind that when you go through the selection process, that the funding must be obligated by September 30th of 2024, and the funding must be expended by September 30th of 2029. And as you select the projects please keep in mind that after September the 30th of 2024, any of the COVID-19, the CRRSA funding released from that project would not be eligible to be moved to another project. So basically what that's saying is that if you fund a project with the COVID-19 relief funding, the CRRSA funding, if you started out with $1 million now, and at the end of the project, if you had a couple $100,000 to release, let's say you didn't use all of it, if that occurred after September the 30th of 2024, you would not be able to use that $200,000 on another project. So that sounds simple, but that's really a major thing to consider when you go through the selection process for the projects, and remember how you fund the project, whether you use 100% the CRRSA funding, or maybe you split fund it with CRRSA funding and some of your dedicated funding or some of your local funding. Now we know the CRRSA funding is eligible for 100% federal dollars. It doesn't require any matching funds, but that doesn't say that you cannot split fund that. So as you determine how you want to fund a project, just keep in mind that any funds that are released from a project after September 30th, 2024, those dollars would go back to Washington. They would not be available for a project. Now, the other thing to keep in mind too is that the funding, the CRRSA funding is for reimbursement. Those expenditures, they have to be fully reimbursed by FHWA prior to September 30th of 2029. So even if you had a project that had expenditures that was actually occurred prior to September 30th of 2029, if those expenditures have not been submitted and approved and reimbursed by FHWA by that date, they would not be eligible for getting reimbursed. So again, when you go through the project selection, and as you manage the project, over the next several years, you have to keep that in mind. Make sure that you seek reimbursement prior to that September 30th, 2029, in sufficient time so that the reimbursement can occur, because after that date, those costs would not be eligible for reimbursement. So you would have to pay for those out of your own funds. And again, I mentioned about split funding the projects. That's, if you split fund a project, the CRRSA funds would not require any match. They are 100% federal. But if you use dedicated MPO, STP funds, whatever dollar amount that you would have to have a 20% match on those. But again, that's something that's doable, and it's as you go through that process, just keep that in mind. And as far as KYTC is concerned, the selection process for using the CRRSA funds within the MPO areas, that strictly be left up to the MPOs. We will work with you in cooperation on how you go through that process, but it's left up to each MPO of how the projects they want to use their dollars on. As far as KYT is concerned, I'll be honest with you. We have really looked at lots of, trying to just determine different strategies, how to maximize the use of the CRRSA funds. Because, we're just like you all, trying to figure out those projects that we feel like that we can get done before September the 30th of 2024. So if we do have any funds that's released, that we can use those on other projects, before that date. And again, we also are looking at the projects as far as expenditures, making sure, if it's a long-term project versus a short-term, a spend-out project. So we're still working on the strategies of how we're going to use those dollars. And I'm sure that each of the MPO areas have been thinking that same thing. But I just want to remind you all on that it's, again, important dates, September 30th of 2024 Anything after that, you cannot obligate the funds after that date. And September 30th of 2029 is, you have to be fully reimbursed by that date or it's not eligible for reimbursement. So with that, Mikhail and Jacob, that's all I have. Thank you all and have a good meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I sent this out. I sent this agenda out, and then Bernadette sent out something about a raise grant too. So there's probably some new funding sources out there as well. Did anybody have any questions for Ron while he's on here? I know he's got a 9:30.
You mentioned the raise grant. Yeah, that's the old Bill grant program. It just has a new name,
It is.
but it's the Bill grant. We're looking at some of those now, working with some of the different communities that will be turning in applications. We have not, don't have a list of projects yet as to which ones that are going to be turned in, but it's basically the Bill grant, same thing as the Bill grant, maybe with a few minor changes, but.
Okay. Let's see if anybody's got questions. I guess type in the chat box there or unmute yourself and ask. If nobody has any questions, I'll give you maybe another minute here. But if nobody has any other questions, we'll go on to Jason Blackburn. Anybody else thinking anything for Ron? Thanks for being on here, Ron. I know you're a busy man.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. And I hate to leave you all, but we're working on some projects for the congressman. So we got to get back and try to get things in. They have to get some projects submitted by Friday. And then again, another group next Friday. So a lot going on, but again, please, don't take it for granted on those earmarks that those earmarked dollars are going to come to be. Please do the shift prioritization process on those projects.
And let's see, Ron's email, ron.rigney@ky.gov, or email me, if you guys got questions that you can think of, after the fact. But yeah, thanks, Ron, for being on here. And let's see, Jason, are you ready to go? We'll go ahead and talk about shift if nobody has anything else for Ron.
10-4, Jacob. I guess I'll
Jason,
start.
go ahead.
Hopefully
Yeah, go
everybody,
ahead.
hopefully everybody can hear me. I'll start off with, of course, I'm old enough that I remember when we got like a 2-foot snow in May. It's not been all that many years ago. So, April's not as surprising, but it is what it is. I will, normally I'll say the bottom line is it's not white at my house. So either I'm living right or I'm living really, really wrong. I don't know, take it for however you want to. So with that being said, let's talk shift. All right. And decided to give, good job, Jacob, decided to give everyone a treat. Thought about doing a PowerPoint, 2 or 3 slides, whatnot, but I was like, people have been working so hard. Let's skip these PowerPoints. There's going to be plenty of them. So let's just let everybody just look at me. I just wanted everybody to see me for while I'm talking. And so, hopefully this gives everybody a good smile and makes their day. Shift 2022. Sponsorship, of course, is where we're at right now. We have 24 days left, so basically 3 weeks. As of this morning, when I checked, we have approximately 289 projects have been sponsored. Estimate somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100 is what will ultimately be sponsored for this cycle. So the third, 30% or so, not too bad. Like I said, we still have a little over 3 weeks. Let's just don't forget about it. Hopefully everybody doesn't try to rush in on that very last day and, do this, that, and the other. And I say that because the people who have went in and sponsored, everybody has seen the exact same mistake. So I'll mention it right now. And basically, pretty much every ad, MPO, or district that's went in to try to sponsor, they've had at least one project that it's not showing up and they can't find it. And basically, and that's generally, it's in regards to a 6-year plan situation or an item number. We're working on that. OIT is trying to get this resolved. Hopefully it'll be done in the coming days, but as soon as that is, I will let everyone know. I'll send out a mass email, let everyone know that it's fixed so they can go in and sponsor those projects. It's an issue on our side of the program, but we are fixing it. Like I said, try to get those in because everybody has had some kind of an issue. It's not just those. There's some things, especially on the ad side, to where it's not populated. So if you come across that, you can see that a project is able to, it's on the sponsor list, but say you as an ad or an MPO don't have that option. Send me an email with the project number. I can go in and make just a couple of changes, and just takes me just a few seconds, and you'll be able to sponsor it then. Moving on, cost estimates. That's kind of for the districts. The districts generally do the cost estimates. Of course, be looking at those. I think the districts out an email, kind of reiterating that. If there's projects that you don't have that, the districts aren't fully aware of, that they don't know the full intention, just want to encourage you to talk to your ads and the MPOs and the sponsor of the project for sure, and make sure that you understand exactly what's going on so that we know that the estimate is correct. And with that, there's no reason that, everybody, if you have access to sponsorship, don't know if everyone realizes it or not. Right there, when you go to the sponsorship screen, there's a little green button that says export, and that'll basically create you an Excel file, and it'll show, the entire list of projects that's eligible across the state. And you can sort and filter and look at, here's what's happened in my area so far, what's left. And I say that for the districts because it's pretty hard to try to go in. If I say, hey, go in and make sure all your estimates are up to date. Well, a district might have 600 projects. I'm not saying to go in and update 600, project estimates. Update the projects that are sponsored. And so that's what I'm meaning, it might be handy for the districts to, every Monday or every Friday, or just pick a day and time to go in and just kind of download that Excel file, sort to your district and see what has been sponsored, and then just go to those projects and, and look at those. All that will, we'll also deal with that during the 2-month kind of data verification process, but there's no harm in doing it right now. So just wanted to let everyone know that. Next up for everyone, perhaps the next important date after the May sponsorship cutoff is going to be June the 18th. And that is basically the draft process report, I guess is how I set it up. If you've been around, you know what I'm talking about. We send in that write-up, whatnot. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. I can see you, so shake your head yes or no if you don't care. But all those need to be sent to Jahan Khan, who's going to assemble. Thanks. So ads, MPOs, district offices, we everyone has to do them. You can go ahead, especially if you're basically finished with it, or even if you aren't, you should be able to go ahead and start writing this your draft. The process, generally a page to 2 pages, and send those in to Jahan so that we can start kind of reviewing those. And, that's just part of the thing. The sooner we get this in, the more time, we have for the review aspect and things of that nature. And so hopefully everything works out. But remember that June 18th and Jahan. Let's see here, a few more things. As projects are being sponsored, and this is basically anyone that's on the CHAF side, so ad, MPO as well, districts are responsible for the estimates, but everyone can go in and look at some other stuff. So, if you're sponsoring especially a new project, go in to like the characteristics screen, and make sure, that's filled out. What type of lane widths, are being proposed. The shoulder widths, things of that nature. That's just the type of stuff that helps us, and it's going to help our modelers to make sure they understand what's going on. The mapping is very important for our modelers, but that's pretty much, if you've got it in there with the mile points, that's takes care of things now. But all that other information is very important as well, so that we know as we move forward, everybody is kind of on the same page and understands what everybody else is thinking. Let's see here. I'm assuming that that's roughly it. Last thing is just some feedback. Always looking for some feedback. How did this round of how's this round went? Because really and truly, we've kind of got the first big hurdle for this entire group is over. It kind of is going to shift to the central office aspect for the next several months with the data verification, the scoring, the statewide kind of project selection, and then it'll come back, of course, to everyone for the regional aspects, the boosting and whatnot. But always looking for some feedback on how everyone thinks this round has went. We made a few changes. We extended some dates, things of that nature. So just was it good? Was it bad? Is everything going smooth thus far? So feel free to either send me an email if you're an ad. Talk to your ad representatives. Natalie, of course, is on our steering committee. Let her know, and she can pass those on at our next committee meeting. As far as MPOs, once again, everybody can send me anything that you want. Don't know who I'll say kind of the MPO liaisons are as far as the MPO itself. I think Thomas handles it on the department side, so let Thomas know, he'll forward it. Or Amanda Spencer is kind of representing MPOs on our steering committee. So if you want to send her something, but that's the only way that we truly improve. It's for everybody to, say, hey, here's, this, we wasn't necessarily comfortable with this, or maybe this could be better. And along with those negative things, that's my specialty. I can tell you generally how things are bad. But it also helps to offer suggestion of how it can be improved. I'm going to learn that myself on a lot of things that I do. So just think about that, Dan. We are looking forward to receiving those as we continue forward. I'm going to say that's about it. We're trucking along. Take any questions or whatnot. We're a little early, so I think that's a good thing. That's maybe a first for me to be over with early. So, Jacob, I'm good to go.
All right, thanks, Jason. I see Scott has a couple of questions in the chat box. You can probably read those as well. Something about exporting some columns, and then another one about new route and bypass. Can you address those, Jason?
The first one, Scott, let's see here. Can the export have columns added? It's a form set up. If there's a true need in some more data, Scott, let me know, which I know me and you will be meeting next week. We can, do there. It's really, that's an OIT is going to have to kind of do a little bit of rewrite, but we could also perhaps get that information in another method. We'll discuss that. And then if a new route or bypass is proposed, can a rough length be included? That's something that will, that's a good one. I would say that's one of those that whether central office does it, or that might be part of that data verification, because hopefully if there is a bypass, people are going in and doing the hand drawing. That's what they're, as the proposed. And then at that point, we should be able to estimate that project length. So we'll hopefully, I guess to me, that's the main thing. If you are proposing a bypass, make sure you're going in under kind of the hand-drawn part of chaff in the location, everyone, and draw in where you think that that route, is, where your group thinks that that should be. Oh boy, another one, Laura. If the project sponsor, gonna go ahead and. Yeah, Laura, you can go ahead and do your sponsorships, and you can sponsor or unsponsor all the way up until the May 14th. It's basically May 15th when is when that'll be cut off. So yeah, you can sponsor and unsponsor to your heart's content up until that day.
See, anybody else got anything for Jason? Shift questions or schedule issues? If not, good job, Jason. Thank you for the update. And Mikhail. Let's see, it's 9:30. Let's see our next. Does anybody else have anything? I guess I'll ask one more time. I don't see anything else in the chat box and nobody's speaking up, so I'm going to assume we are good. Let's see, 9:30 on the agenda. Next speaker is Kenny Bishop. I don't know, Kenny, if you want to go ahead and, I guess you could probably go ahead and do legislative updates if you're ready. Are you on here? Let me scroll the list.
Yeah, I don't
see him on here. So I can talk. I've got a little bit of a filler with the rural consultation survey, so I'll go ahead and chat about that. We finished that up earlier this year. I'll share my screen here if I can open this up. So I think I talked about it last meeting briefly. We send this report to FHWA and FTA summarizing our outreach efforts to non-metropolitan officials. So I'm sure the MPOs have all kinds of different reports and things to fill out as well. But this one, I'll go over kind of briefly some of the survey results because I thought they were interesting. So let me share my screen. Okay, you guys can see that. Okay, so I'm gonna have to work on this for the next time. We do this every 5 years. I'm gonna have to put some pictures and things in it next time, some graphs and charts and all that kind of stuff. I didn't do a whole lot of that, but looking at some of the surrounding states, they have nice title page pictures and things. So we'll work on that. A lot of this is just history, kind of is all on our planning website. If you guys want to read it all the way through, it's a good team building type exercise to see how our rural communities are being included. I guess you don't necessarily have to be rural, but non-metropolitan. And there are basically 25 questions that we asked. So I'll scroll through those here for a few minutes until Kitty gets here. There's the link if you guys want to read it in its entirety. And we just finished it up earlier this year. I think I submitted it February to FHWA and FTA. We sent out 536 postcards and 523 emails. And then we got back 180 responses, which I guess is okay. Seems like that's usually what the survey results get, 20-30% or something. 85 counties represented. It's a simple postcard. We had a division of postal services and a graphic design department kind of helped us out a lot with logistics and all that. So the first question was, are you a member of the RTC Regional Transportation Committee? And most everybody was. Your interest, a lot of them were locally elected officials, but we did have some industry and general public interested. How long have you been involved? So we've got some experience on these RTCs, which is good. And we got some newbies. How often have you attended? So some of the feedback was just the drive time, locations. We tried to scatter them out, the best we could. How has COVID affected it? A lot of people didn't really know yet. I'd like to be, it'd be a neat presentation to have something on, you know, the COVID impacts as soon as we know them a little bit better. So we kind of got that on the list. A lot of people thought that the virtual thing helped, obviously. How convenient are they? It's kind of so-so, I guess. You feel like you've had a good opportunity. Most everybody agrees that they've had opportunity to participate. How responsive, good turnout on that one. I think our ads are helping us out tremendously with responses and response time. Satisfaction is good. And these were some of the changes. Some of them were kind of fun to read if you get the opportunity to look up this report. And then the demographics, let's see. This is how often people are asking the ads questions. How eager they are to help, knowledgeable. So everything, to me, the results were all good. And a little bit of negative feedback, but that's what this stuff is for. Then how well, see, how do you think Kentucky Transportation Cabinet understands which community needs? These are the kind of questions that are interesting to me. How well we're communicating our mission around the state. So it'd be neat to see the MPO type surveys as well. Another communication one. This is a map of where they lived around the state. Kind of, you know, a little bit darker, the more people that responded. I kind of like those heat maps. Anytime I see those heat maps, I'm kind of interested. And this, we did, where do you live, then where do you work? So they were pretty similar. I think we had 3 or 4 people that worked in a different county. Age, it's pretty good spread. Gender, speaks for itself. Race speaks for itself. It would be neat to see some more diversity where we can get it. In income, and where did you learn about it? This one, the social media, I think it would be neat to capture some of that kind of real time, some of those real time results from the social media and things. But KYTC seemed like most everybody had heard about the RTC from the ads and the MPOs. Then we had a plan of action. And again, it's all summarized at this website link. If you go to our homepage and go to planning and regional planning. So I don't know how often everybody gets on that planning website, but it's got a lot of good information on there. You just have to navigate through it a little bit. This is just a list of all the people, all the mayors and judges and cities and counties that we sent it to. And like I said, we track that every 5 years. We put that report together. So we were just sharing that because we just finished it up this year. So it was a major update for us to update FHW and FTA. And the way the law says, it says they're not really supposed to tell us how to do the report. We just have to do it and then give them a copy. So it's kind of interesting how they encourage us to do it. Okay, that being said, let's see if Kenny's on. Okay, I see Kenny Bishop is on here now. Let's see, his bio is pretty short and sweet. Mr. Kenny Bishop is the legislative director of the Transportation Cabinet. So
all you need to know.
So thanks for being on here, Mr. Bishop. And Mikhail sent out an email earlier, what was it, a couple months ago, Mikhail, with some updates. So I guess whenever the session ended, it was fascinating for me to kind of read through that. And so we asked Kenny to come and kind of share some of the updates that came out of the legislative session this time. So go ahead, Kenny.
Sure. Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity this morning. And, you know, overall, I was really pretty pleased with our legislative session. It was a little odd and somewhat awkward in a variety of ways. You know, it's typically during the legislative session, you have the opportunity to be in the hallways and to meet with legislators one-on-one in their offices and work through the issues and work through the legislation. And we didn't have the opportunity to do that this year. We pretty much had to present everything remotely and meet remotely. And so it made for a little bit of a different session, but at the same time, I think it gave us a little bit better real-time perspective just because we did a lot of it on the phone and we did a lot of it remotely. And especially compared to I've talked to a lot of my counterparts in the other cabinets, and from the reports that I've heard from them, I think the Transportation Cabinet had a really successful session this year. We had 11 agenda items that we were working on, trying to get through, besides all of the other legislation that other legislators were working on themselves. And of the 11, all but 3 of them actually got traction and were passed. And so that was pretty remarkable, and I was pretty proud of that. The 3 items that didn't pass, unfortunately, were related to work zone safety and highway safety. And the sponsoring legislators have promised us that they're going to work with us over the interim to hopefully be able to get some traction on those bills. One of them would be a ban on the use of handheld devices as long as vehicles in motion. That one has been batted around for a lot of years, and hopefully it's eventually going to get some traction. I think everybody's aware that we already have some laws on the books related to that, but we wanted to put a little bit of teeth in those laws with that bill. So hopefully that's something that'll happen next time. The other 2 were related to work zone. One of them would expand double fines. And by that, it just basically would mean that work zones were double fine zones, whether signs are posted or not, indicating that they're double fine zones. And then another would deal with automated speed enforcement. And hopefully those 3 bills will get some traction next session around. We're already working with the legislature on those. But we had some big bills passed this time around that we were really excited about. Of course, our budget bill passed, House Bill 193, and it really was pretty much just a continuation. I think everybody's aware that we had an odd session last year because of COVID, and so there were no 2-year budgets passed a year ago. They just passed a 1-year budget, which meant that they had to pick up and pass another 1-year budget this time around. And they really did pretty much just pass what our 2nd year budget that we proposed a couple of years ago. So we were pretty pleased with the budget. There were some restraints that were placed in the budget this year, but because the transportation budget was the only one that was passed after the veto period, and that meant that the governor really pretty much could do what he wanted to do with the transportation budget bill, and he did line item 2 or 3 items in the budget bill that were going to constrain our use of funds and carryover funds. So we were pleased that the governor took our suggestions and vetoed some of those pieces out of the budget bill. Probably the biggest piece of legislation that passed for us this time around, it was the most consuming, it was the most emotional of all the bills, was the House Bill 328, which deals with outdoor advertising, billboards. I think most folks are probably aware that our billboard program was deemed unconstitutional by the federal courts, U.S. District Court in Western Kentucky, and that meant that we had a lot of what I termed renegade or unpermitted billboards that started going up almost immediately. As soon as the courts declared our program unconstitutional, we just had a lot of billboards going up around the state. We never did get a real actual count of the number of billboards that went up, but we estimate that it was well over 100 that went up. And so we needed to get a piece of legislation in place right away that could address that, that would at least allow us to stop the unpermitted billboards from going up. And so House Bill 328 did that. It helped us to get our billboard program back in order, but it also required us to get the regs in place almost right away. And so we've been working fast and furious to try to get the regs put in place. There are a lot of stakeholders who want to have a voice in getting the regs in place. And so it's sort of been like renegotiating the legislation all over again as we build those regs. But we're really, really pleased that we were able to get that piece of legislation passed. It was crucial. We were hearing from a lot of folks across the state on both sides, all sides of that issue. And so we were really glad to get that in place. Some of the other legislation that we sponsored and that we considered as our priority and agenda were dealt with license plates and driver's licenses. One of them was Kentucky was one of the few states in the country that did not allow military personnel who were stationed here and their immediate families to maintain their home state driver's licenses while they're here. And so we were able to pass a piece of legislation that now allows that to happen. So members of the military who were stationed in Kentucky are able to maintain their home state driver's licenses and their immediate families while they're here. So we were really glad to get that done. And we worked with the Kentucky Commission on Military Affairs to get that one passed. And then some license plate issues were taken care of. As I think most folks know, we've already been using the new flat license plates. We needed to get some legislation in place that would give us the footing for the regs that would need to be put in place to make those permanent, and the legislation put in place that would allow the KRS to be established. So we were able to get that done. We were able to do some cleanup language on specialty license plates. And we were able to do a couple of reorgs. We were able to move the Motorcycle Safety Education Commission from the Justice Cabinet to the Transportation Cabinet. And something that's really big was we're able to establish the Secretary's Office of Safety in the Transportation Cabinet. And that's going to be a really, really big deal moving forward. And we were really, really glad that we were able to get that done. So those are just a lot of the pieces of legislation that the Transportation Cabinet had on our agenda. There were several other pieces of legislation that were passed that weren't necessarily on our agenda, but we were able to work with the sponsors and the legislators to make sure that they were crafted in a way that wouldn't negatively impact the Transportation Cabinet. Some of those were things like using our electronic signs on the interstates and highways when a person is missing during golden alerts and things like that. A new classification of a license for for people who test on a three-wheel motorcycle, so that if they test on a three-wheel motorcycle, they're basically limited to the use of a three-wheel motorcycle, and they can't use that license to ride a two-wheel bike. Another piece of legislation that we were really proud of would allow the Eastern Kentucky University's aviation program to expand with the use of the airport in Madison County, and it would allow them to make some investments in the airport there. Truth is, I wasn't fully aware of how large that program was, and the fact that we were able to work with them to make it even stronger and larger and more of a presence in the aviation field, we were really, really proud of that. So that was a really good piece of legislation. And then we had a couple of what we call mules and Christmas tree bills. Those are bills that were supposed to be simple, reorg bills, but because they were so simple, legislators took advantage of those and attached some of their own, what we call Christmas ornaments to those bills, things like renaming the Louis B. Nunn Cumberland Parkway, the Louis B. Nunn Cumberland Expressway. And that was for economic development purposes and investment purposes. And so we just had a lot of those really good bills that address local communities and local issues. And one other bill that we really, really wanted to try to get through and we weren't successful at was one that would allow local municipalities and cities to take over the administration of local auto recyclers. And so we're going to hopefully work on that and try to get that one done in this legislative session too. But that's kind of the legislative update. That's kind of what we had going on. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thanks, Kenny. Let's see, does anybody have any questions for Kenny? Type them in the chat box there or speak up for a couple minutes here. Let's see, Kenny, when was the session over? When did, I don't remember when I got that email.
The session ended on March the 15th. During the odd number years, they're limited to 30 working days. And the Constitution requires that they adjourn sine die by March the 15th in odd numbered years. In even number years, they can work 60 days and they have to adjourn sine die by April 30th.
Yes, cool. Let's see, are we expecting any like special sessions or anything coming up soon, or what's on the
There's
horizon?
always talk. Another piece, there was a lot of conversation during this legislative session. We met and had a lot of conversation with legislative leadership on some highway revenue. I think everyone here knows that we're really limited. Several years ago, there was a piece of legislation passed that raised gas revenue and fuel revenue, but it also put caps on that so that, and it tied the revenue to the price of gasoline, I think the price of fuel. And it went really stagnant there for quite a while. And we always find ourselves in the need of more revenue, but we were working with legislative leadership to maybe get a bill passed that would allow us to raise some of that revenue, but we weren't able to get that across the finish line. But the conversations continue, and because the conversations continue, there is a little bit of talk about the possibility of, if we were able to reach an agreement, maybe we could convince the governor to call a special session and try to go ahead and get that bill across the finish line. But those conversations are ongoing.
Yeah, cool. Let's see. Steve DeWitt saying he saw reporters on Twitter that the gas tax bill almost resurrected on the final day.
Yeah, it was. We were working with them way into the night, all the way up to the final hours of the session, and we were holding our breath and crossing our fingers. And it really did have, it had some teeth up to the very, very last moment. So yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, thanks again, Kenny. Appreciate all you do there. I know it's a very important piece of our job for sure. And the planners around the state, it helps just to kind of be in the loop and all that. I know there's some websites too, I guess, legislative websites people are probably checking. But
Yeah, absolutely.
Transportation.
The LRC website is, I just had that pulled up as a matter of fact right now. So let me go ahead and I can get you the web address on that. It's really pretty simple. It's just legislature.ky.gov. And you can look up all the legislation, all the committee reports. You can actually drill down into who voted for and against a particular piece of legislation. And it's a really informative site. You can spend a whole lot of time on it. If you're a geek like me, there are other folks who aren't nearly as interested in that sort of thing as I am. But I also want to say that, and I've shared this with the secretary and with the legislature and with the governor and the governor's office. We just have such an incredible team of people in the transportation cabinet. And there's no way that I can walk into a meeting with a legislator or a committee meeting or even take a phone call from a constituent without all of you as a resource. And I rely on all of you. There's a whole lot I don't know, but I always tell folks that I know somebody who does know. And so I can pick up the phone or I can send an email. And especially during the legislative session, I'm not really an expert on anything. My job is to try to guide the legislation through, but the information always comes from this vast team of people who are loaded with expertise and information. And so I really appreciate all of you and all the folks who helped us along during the legislative session.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. Let's see if nobody else has any questions for Kenny. Have a good rest of the day. Feel free to stay on the meeting if you want to just see the rest of the meeting presenters. This is being recorded too, so we'll post it online or something when we get done.
Sounds great. Thank you all very much.
Okay, let's see it. Yeah, thank you. All right, the next topic on the agenda is socioeconomic resources. We have an agenda setting committee that we're kicking out these ideas, and I think it was DeWitt said something about the environmental guys, and I said, oh, that's a good idea. So Mr. Tim Foreman, let me read his bio. He's a branch manager for project coordination and underground storage tank hazardous materials sections. He's a native of Fayette County, and now lives and works in Frankfurt. He worked for a local engineering firm for 8 years as a NEPA specialist and has been with the cabinet for 16 years in the division of environmental analysis doing NEPA compliance. Without further ado, welcome Mr. Tim Foreman.
Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this group again. It's been a while. I see we have quite a list of participants. Congratulations to everybody making it out to the meeting in this inclement weather we're having. Glad to be here. I was asked to speak on the use of socioeconomic data in the analysis of projects that we complete for federally funded projects. And that process has changed and evolved over the years. I think we issued our first guidance back in 2011, updated it in 2014, and it is being updated again as we speak. So look for some new guidance to come out on how we conduct our EJ compliance. That's environmental justice for those who aren't familiar with the term EJ. Specifically, we're looking for adverse and disproportionate impacts to low-income and minority people. Federal Highways back in 2011 had encouraged us to do a little more on our lower level projects, our categorical exclusions, and they were satisfied with the process we had in place for our larger projects, our environmental assessment and environmental impact statement level projects, where we have a lot of public participation and a lot of interaction with the community. And so it was our lower level projects where we don't have that robust participation that they were a little concerned with. So we started to develop some good guidance, and the new guidance that we're coming out with will focus more heavily on that. So previously, we were sending out letters to those who were directly impacted, residential relocations mainly, and asking some fairly personal information, financial, racial, demographic type information to determine if we had low income or minority populations in the area and how we were affecting them. Our new process will still do that. It's just being enhanced a bit. We're going to rely more on some census data, and we're developing a tool using EJ Screen, the EPA's EJ Screen tool, and along with some ArcGIS. So as we look at our projects, we're trying to identify, impacts to low-income and minorities, and that can include direct impacts such as relocation, or indirect impacts where we're having maybe a noise or air impact to those communities. So that's where we're at right now. But socioeconomic data plays an important role in how we go about assessing our alternatives And we're specifically looking for those impacts to those disenfranchised communities who haven't had much of a voice in our projects in the past. So we're working through that process with Federal Highways now, should have that guidance issued in a month or so. But what we're looking for again is impacts to low income and minority communities. And when we see that we may have those, we're going to propose some targeted public involvement where we engage these folks and make sure that they are involved in the decision-making process. That was what was lacking prior, was getting these folks involved and getting their voice heard on the projects that we were proposing. So we look at we utilize the 5-year American Community Survey data and start there and look at our project area specifically and compare that to our surrounding project, the census blocks and our census tracts and our block groups surrounding our project area to see if, where the concentrations of low income and minority are and if we are impacting them or not. And then if we determine that there is a potential for impact, we'll have that targeted public outreach where we'll communicate with those folks directly, either in group or individual form. We haven't worked that out just yet, but we're really looking to enhance our public involvement to specifically seek out information involving low income and minority communities and get their voice heard. That's what had been lacking. So that's kind of where we're at in a nutshell right now. I can go through what we used to do in the past, but I don't know that that's going to be much relevant anymore here soon. So but just be on the lookout for our new EJ guidance being posted to the DE website here fairly soon, as soon as we can get it passed through all the approvals.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I was trying to think of how, like when you're getting all this data and stuff, are you physically contacting them? Like, are there resources, I guess, for like deaf, hard of hearing and language barriers, etc.? Are there people that will go with you to contact these people, or are you just like one-on-one?
Well, we haven't worked out all those details yet, but that's a great question. Limited English proficiency is an issue, and I hadn't honestly, we hadn't discussed the other impairments that may impede that interaction. But yeah, that's definitely something that we need to include. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I was trying to think of some of the challenges we run into. Some of the responses from the survey, the last meeting, they're kind of wondering about resources and things. When we get this information, how do we approach them, or like what does it mean? There's different levels I know of, like environmental documents that we're trying to get, or say they've got these projects in shift, etc. Are there things that do we have to have this socioeconomic data for all the different documents, or is it just like one or two of them?
For our CEs for minor projects, no, we don't do anything. Those are projects that have very little impacts, mostly stay within existing right of way. There are no residential relocations, so we don't do any socioeconomic analysis for those projects. For our categorical exclusions levels 1 through 3, yes, we will be using this new tool that we're in development now to look at the project area and its surrounding areas and try to identify those where there may be pockets of those minority and low income communities. And then we will compare that with the surrounding area to see if maybe there are higher concentrations in other areas where we would, that would certainly lessen our impact on those communities. But after that, we're going to propose that we have this targeted public involvement where we have some meetings specifically with those, right in the project area and the surrounding areas, and try to seek out. That's one of the things that our larger projects do, our EAs and EIS level projects, is that we have a lot of community advisory groups, and then some of those will have environmental justice subcommittees where we'll have some of the local agencies that provide aid to those communities involved, and that way they can reach out to the people that they serve and try to get as much inclusion and involvement as we can. So that's where we're trying to go with our categorical exclusion level projects as well. We're trying to make it consistent, that process consistent across all documentation levels. Not all of our categorical exclusions have public meetings. CE1s typically don't have any public involvement. They're relatively small projects. CE2s, we usually do informational meetings. CE2s and 3s will do informational meetings with the public, and then advise them of the project that's out there and seek feedback where we can. So that's kind of the difference between the way we treat our levels of documents. We're trying to make that more consistent.
And then I'm kind of thinking like with, so if we see a grant out there, does that the American Community Survey, or do we have like a history of like progress we've made, or that kind of thing? Are we tracking it? Are we tracking it as a cabinet to kind of show where people can go, say they're writing a grant application, they can say, well, this is how this area has been affected over so many years, and this is what we're doing to try and address the
No, I'm not aware of any tracking of that sort of thing. We certainly could, retroactively go back through and look at some projects and come up with an idea of how that's working. Rarely, it is quite rare where you have a project that has an impact, a disproportionate and adverse impact to the local communities. The example is Newtown Pike, where we spent more on environmental justice impact mitigation than we actually spent on the project. That's where we rebuilt neighborhoods and that sort of thing. But rarely do we find that. What we do find is we will have a relocation that it involves a family cluster where we may be relocating one member of that family that impacts other members of the family that live around them. You'll find that they share services like babysitting or transportation, or even utilities sometimes. And if we relocate one of those, it could affect the rest of the family quite a bit. And there is a process in the right-of-way phase of projects where we can actually relocate those that aren't directly impacted by the project, but are impacted by the relocation of a key member of that household. So that's what we're looking for more than anything, those types of impacts where we're having a larger impact just beyond the actual relocation. And that's where that public involvement comes in. You can't get that out of census survey data. You have to have that one-on-one interaction. So
let's see. Sorry, I had so many questions here. The only other thing I was thinking of was, are there goals or like danger zones or something? Like I'm thinking of when we're studying the animals and plants and things too, but with people, like, do we have targets where we need to where we're trying to lift people out of poverty, say, or trying to make more diversity, et cetera? Are there goals like that, or you guys are mainly just tracking what the situation is, right?
Mainly, we're just tracking what the situation is. We do have projects that are for economic development, and we look at those. If we're building a roadway to, say, an industrial park, we have to look at the impact of the entire development and not just our roadway. I do see we have a question in the chat box. The area development districts have Title VI plans that discuss language, disability barriers, and resources. Yes, we do our best to comply with Title VI along with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Executive Order 12898 issued by Clinton administration that really charged the federal agencies to take a hard look at impacts to these disenfranchised communities that have been impacted quite largely in the past by when we built our interstate system. You know, we targeted these areas that had low property costs, and that was typically low income and minority areas. And so while we're not building new interstates much anymore, we are building new roads every day. And so we try to look at those and identify any impacts and mitigate where we can.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot, Tim, for your time. It's all educational. It's all some valuable intel there for, especially, you know, me, some of the newcomers. But let's see, does anybody else have any questions for Tim? If not, let's see, did I freeze? Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we still hear you.
Okay,
Your
good.
video may have frozen a bit.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's see. Thanks, Tim. I don't see any other questions, so I appreciate you being here. And then
Yeah, I
that'll
appreciate
segue
your
us in.
time.
Yeah, okay.
You guys have a great meeting.
Yeah, you too. Feel free to stay on here if you want to.
Very good, thank
If
you.
you want to catch the rest of it. All right, let's see, that segues us into the next socioeconomic piece. I know the ads use these profiles. I know Steve Witt's group over there with all the studies, we usually got these socioeconomic profiles or environmental justice reports that go into it. So Eunice Holland is the transportation planner at Kentucky River Area Development District in Hazard. It's a position she's held for 15 years. Eunice is also the lead coordinator of the ad planners. She helps me out all the time, getting meetings set up and getting information back and forth. She's a 2004 graduate of Morehead State University and is currently enrolled in Western Kentucky University's Local Government Administration Graduate Certificate Program. And Mrs. Holland is a lifelong resident of Perry County. So with that, please welcome Ms. Eunice Holland.
Thank you, Jacob. This will definitely go with Tim's discussion about socioeconomic data. I'm going to share my screen real fast. I did develop a PowerPoint for everybody. Let's see. A little bit easier to show everything.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Yeah, Jacob asked us, the ads have a socioeconomic profiles, a task in our annual work program. A little fast. The socioeconomic data is, as Tim had mentioned, is collected annually by the U.S. Census Bureau with the American Community Survey. And that is a 5-year estimates. The current one is the 2019 survey, which is from 2015 to 2019. We coordinate with the Kentucky State Data Center, which is part of, is at the University of Louisville, to obtain the data that from the ACS survey. The ads, we develop a GIS file and develop maps, complete a regional analysis. There are 5 demographics that we collect the data from the at the block group level, and that is age, race, income, disability, and English proficiency. The data that we receive from the State Data Center is just a huge Excel file. It's statewide. So then that's where I come in and I go in and enter formulas to develop the percentages to represent that data. And here's the formula sheet that I provide to the ad planners so that they can use to create when they create their maps, and also for future reference whenever we're developing projects or for use. The maps that we create, they are due at the end of this month. Actually, we do that in April every year. There are 5 different tables, as I had mentioned, 65 plus. We have the minorities, and these maps are posted on the ADS webpage. They're presented at the Regional Transportation Committee meetings, the local meetings, the AD board meetings, and as Jessica mentioned in the chat, we also provide that information in our Title VI plans. We have poverty is one of them that we identify. Disability, and this is some type of disability. The data is also utilized in our grant writers at the ADS whenever they are submitting an application. So we provide that data to them also. We use, this is the limited English proficiency, which we use the very less than very well is what we use as the identifier for the data. Our public involvement plan that each ad has, it's on our websites, is due at the end of the fiscal year. We have the maps in that plan, and then along with the maps, we have an analysis. We have quick facts about the region and also about the counties with those demographics. As Tim had mentioned, used to we did a environmental justice review, but now we call it the socioeconomic study. The ads are requested to do this with most transportation studies. Here you see the methodology. We use those 5 tables, and this is just to identify the areas of concern that are, possibly affected. We don't really analyze the data or go any steps further, as Tim had mentioned, with public involvement and how to do that outreach or access those people that are possibly affected. We are just identifying those areas. And as you can see here, this was the last one that I had completed. We take the project area and we identify the block groups. And also we take each of those 5. This is for disability, and we identify those, the populations that are possibly affected in that area. We compare it. We have the statistics for the US, for the state, for the CRAD region as a whole, or the AD region. My AD has 8 counties, so that's all of the 8 counties. We do it for the county that the study covers, or counties. This one, it was for Perry County, and there were 2 block groups that were affected in the area. So we have both of those represented in the chart. So this is all included in the transportation, the study, along with the study. As I mentioned before, this is the socioeconomic maps are completed at the end of April for the ads, and then the public involvement plan at the end of June. And you can locate that information on each ads webpage. And then we also, as the highway districts know, as you attend meetings, we provide that information to our transportation meetings and to all of the local officials.
Yeah, thanks, Eunice. Good job, good presentation.
Thank you.
Eunice, like I said, I couldn't do this job without Eunice, definitely, and Randall over in the but all the ad planners are a very valuable resource statewide, to help us gather data for the definitely for the transportation pieces. But one of the things I enjoy with the ads is they're reaching out. These planners are working with different sections, working with elderly populations, disabled populations, all the minority, and it's neat to be involved with that network so we can better communicate across the state. Let's see, does anybody have any questions for Eunice? about socioeconomic profiles. After this, we have a break, so that's good. We can stretch your legs and stuff. At 10:40, everybody will come back to listen about some emergency flood relief in Lee County. So let's see if nobody else has anything else for Eunice. Thanks, Eunice.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I don't see anything else in the chat box, guys. So let's go ahead and adjourn until 10:40. Give us about 20 minutes to get up, walk around, get some exercise, and take a break from the computer screen. I'll stay on here for a few minutes, if anybody's got questions for me. Other than that, I'll share my kind of generic screen here. All right, thanks, guys. It's getting close to 10:40. Let's see, the next speakers are Honorable Chuck Cottle and Mr. John Allen. Let's see if they're on here. I see Mr. Allen.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. All right, bear with me just a second here, and we'll get the judge over here. He has a few words, and then we'll move into my part.
Yeah, okay. I'll read your, I'll go ahead and read your all's bios. I'll read them both together. That'll take a little bit of time. And then I'll intro him if he can make it, or you just start talking, whatever works.
He's
All
right
right,
here.
so let's see. It's 10:40, so we'll go ahead and get kicked off again, guys. This topic came up from our committee, our agenda committee. I think Bernadette brought it up. It was in the news. I know Lee County, there was some flooding and all that kind of stuff going on. So Eunice Holland recommended these guys to speak. So they're a good couple guys to talk about it. So the first one, Honorable Chuck Cottle Jr. is a first-term judge executive in Lee County. He's a 1971 transplant to Lee County when his father retired with a 13-year-old and his 12-year-old sister to his boyhood home after a career in the United States Air Force. 1977 graduate of Lee County High School. He completed a Bachelor of Arts degree in Theater Arts at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas in 1981, and was commissioned an Ensign Service Warfare Officer in the United States Navy, serving on USS William C. Law, USS Kidd, USS Miller, USS Hercules, USS Seattle, and USS Detroit. He ended his Navy career in 2001 as Executive Officer of Naval Weapons Station, Earl and Commander, Naval Surface Force, Atlantic Liaison for Operation Noble Eagle in support of operation in New York City after the attack on 9/11. He's got a master's degree in education from St. Peter's College in Jersey City, New Jersey, and is a member of the Screen Actors Guild and Actors Equity. He's the former owner of Pinecrest Camp, Hostel and Campground, and former general manager of the Beattyville Enterprise. His wife, Pamela, is the Senior Associate Provost for Research Admin at Yale University, and his stepchildren, John and Beth, are retail executives in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So that's Honorable Chuck Cottle's bio. And I'll go ahead and read Mr. Jonathan Allen's as well. He's the EMA director over there. And then I'll hand it over to the judge. So Mr. Jonathan Allen is originally from Hazard before leaving to attend EKU, where he majored in police administration. Upon leaving EKU, John spent 18 years with the Kentucky State Police, where he was assigned to Lee County. He and his family have called it home since 1995. In July of 2019, he was hired as the Emergency Management Director for Lee County, as well as serving as the Emergency Medical Services Director. John is a Regional Vice President of the Kentucky Emergency Managers Association, a National Registry EMT, a founding member of the Lee County Overdose Task Force, among many other boards and organizations. So thank you guys for being on here today. And Judge Cottle, if you want to go ahead and start talking about the topic of interest here.
First of all, Jacob, thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak. And as I said earlier, I think the best person to share with exactly how Lee County implemented and planned for these recent catastrophes and how we adapted and adjusted would best be explained by my emergency management administrator, John Allen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to him because he has the details, and I will move myself to the back and listen to what's going on and interject if I have to. So
okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you all for having us today. I'm going to try to move my screen over here so I'm looking at the right camera. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to in the bottom, across the bottom on my desktop. I see it across the bottom. There's a little green like screen with an arrow.
All right, let's see what happens here. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
See it now?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. So basically what we're going to talk about today is the incident planning and response. This may or may not apply to some of the things that you do in the Department of Transportation. However, these are some of the things that we learned by going through these incidents, and they're kind of some points that may help you get around some of the incidents that you manage. It'll probably be more beneficial for the development districts, as they probably deal more with the individual part and the PA part than transportation does, but transportation does have a PA element in disasters. So let me see if I can make this do what I want it to do now. Okay, so anytime you have planning is basically planning. It's just that taking the initiative to plan for events regardless of the type builds a cohesive unit that will function as such when the event occurs. Our planning meetings are pretty simple and informal, but knowing who the players are at the table is one of the most important things that you're going to deal with. I won't go down the rabbit hole of talking about the districts, how things are districted in Kentucky with all the different organizations, and all the districts are different. So you about have to have a program to see who the players are in each district or region. So if we redistricted everything and put everybody in one district, all transportation, all state police, all emergency management, all CRAD or development districts, and all those things into similar regions, it may make things function a little better. But that's John's 2 cents. So you don't think about that. The old adage, those that fail to plan to fail. You've got to have some type of emergency operations plan in place, and you have to be able to modify that as you go. So we were planning for an ice storm the early part of February. We had a planning meeting. We got everybody together. We looked at all the things. We brought all the players into a Zoom meeting. There was about 20 of us in there, and we laid out all the plans for this ice storm that we were supposed to have. Well, guess what? We didn't get it. It went around Lee County. So a week or so later, we do in fact get an ice storm. So we were all ready to go on that. So we worked our way through the ice storm. And by the time the flood came, we were working as a pretty cohesive unit through all of our agencies, our public works, our ambulance service, our emergency management, our search and rescue. So we were able to manage that incident from experiences that we'd had in the prior incident just a week or two earlier. So this is pretty much what downtown Beta will look like, almost at the height of the flooding. So we had almost right around $2 million in damages, 100 family units displaced, and about 89 businesses destroyed in our downtown area. So to say that this was substantial for us is an understatement. One of the things that I would encourage you to do, even in the transportation side, is to be familiar with the NEM system, the ICS system. The minimum that we require for our responders are ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800. And those are classes that you can get online through FEMA. They are very helpful when it comes down to managing large incidents like this, because it's a very adaptive process that will let you go as large or as small as you need to. But the main thing is be flexible and be able to modify it. So back to our planning meeting that we had for the ice storm. Once again, we had brought all these folks to the table to plan for this thing, and it was very advantageous for us going forward. It's probably one of the first ones that Lee County has done in some time, but I assure you that we're going to do those in the future. They're informal, folks. I mean, it's just basically coming to the table and brainstorming with the people that you are in the room with, and with the different organizations, and listening to everybody else's perspective and coming up with a plan based on that. So in these planning meetings, we looked at 3 different things. We looked at our public safety assignments, our law enforcement, our emergency services, what they were going to be responsible for. We also looked at our sheltering assignments, and that who was going to operate the shelter if in fact we didn't need it. And then our recovery assignments, who was going to be responsible for what when we moved into the recovery phase of the disaster. With our sheltering assignments, we didn't really need our shelter much for the ice storm that we in fact eventually got, but we needed to activate our shelter almost instantaneously during the flood, because we evacuated about 30 people from a trailer park all at once. We had no place for them to go. So because that plan was in place, we were able to activate that shelter almost immediately and have them a place to go. The communications through these disasters are very, very, very important, but they can also become very convoluted if you don't have an action plan. Everybody gets excited and wants to get on the radio and tell where they're going or what they're doing, and it's hard to control that sometimes. But one of the things that we found was very advantageous for us was the use of group messaging during this disaster. We were able to put calls out to the group. We were able to see who was responding to the calls. We were able to have a documented a portion of that we could go back and say, okay, this person is assigned to this person is assigned to this. So group messaging can be very advantageous for you in your planning phase as well as in your response phase. It's basically free depending on what platform that you use. You can target what group of people that you want to talk to. And then also just bear in mind that it is subject to open record. So, you know, the information that is put on there needs to remain professional and needs to remain task specific. And once again, it allowed us almost instant communication with our strike team. So I could assign a team out to go check on a lady on this road that possibly could be flooded in, and I could give them real-time data that was coming through the command post. All right, so once again, our ice storm preparation led into our flood response. We were familiar with each other by the time we got there. I've said that already, but we were working pretty good as a unit, and that's why your planning is so important. If you do these planning meetings correctly and you practice, then when these events occur, they go pretty easy. This is one thing that I want to talk about because this became very important to us. As you can imagine, our town flooded very quickly. People didn't know what was going on. We had emergency services running all over the place. And so it was very important to establish a command post that everyone knew where that command post was. And that was the point of contact, the point of resource for everything. So when you set up an incident, even with transportation, the acronym that we like to use is LABOR. It's our location. We announce our location. We pick our location first, where we can be seen and see the incident, but yet be out of the incident itself. Also, you want to announce where you are. Everybody needs to know where that position is, where that command post is. And if you are the incident commander, you need to understand that you're going to be confined to a box. That is where you need to be. People need to be able to come to that box and know where you are, whether that be inside your vehicle, whether that be at the back of the truck, wherever that is, whatever works for you. But that is where they need to be able to find you. And then, of course, observe the incident. You want to be able to just see what's going on around you and be able to take in that real-time data as the incident transpires. And then, of course, relax. Don't bring chaos to the chaos. Bring calm to the chaos. That if I can emphasize anything enough, even with transportation, if you guys have a car wreck that shuts down part of the road and you send a response, or if you've got a slip that's come off, don't bring chaos to the chaos. People are going to look to you as the leader to be the calming voice and be the rational voice. And so just don't bring chaos to the chaos. This actually shows our instant command during the flood. You can see the truck there, the white truck. That everybody knew that is where I was going to be. That is where everything was going to occur. That's where they could find the judge and the mayor. That was where we operated from. It doesn't matter what you do or what you choose, but just stay consistent once you do it. Don't be moving all over the place. In managing these incidents, your PIO is extremely important. Whomever you choose that to be, they need to be the single point of contact for the media. That way you're putting the information out consistently. You're putting the information out in the time that you want to put it out. Using traditional media works really, really good if you want to push information that you want to show up on the news, but it doesn't really work that well for pushing out information that you need out in real time. We don't have a radio station here in Lee County. We don't have a TV station. So our options are we use Facebook Live. And it worked out very advantageous for us putting that information out there. And we used it throughout the incident and into the beginning of the recovery phase. All right, so I want to hit just some of the things that you would have to deal with here in an incident real quick. Damage assessments. Transportation should know what damage assessments are. You all conduct quite a bit of them. I know you did during this disaster as well. Your damage assessments from our perspective is a little bit different with the PA and the IA, but it's still the same damage assessment. On the IA part of it, if you're dealing with individual assessments from damage, there's a lot of things that you need to take into consideration. One of those is when you do a survey 123, and I'm sure pretty much everybody knows what that is. It's how we capture the data for the assessment that actually ends up going to KYM and then on up to FEMA. That doesn't give the resident anything. They basically don't even know that person's name. They basically know an address and that's it. So it's very important that you give these folks something tangible to hang on to. So when FEMA does come around or the Red Cross comes around, they know that this person was a victim of the flood and they know the category of damage that this person sustained. This has been paid dividends for us over and over and over and over again in this flood because people were actually able to have something tangible and hand the Red Cross to say, this is me, this is the damage that I incurred. Once again, survey 123, it's real quick and easy, but it doesn't provide the victim with anything at all. On your PA assessments, this is our lock at Heidelberg. As you can see, one of the gates actually failed in the flood there, has come down. But on your PA assessments, it's essentially the same thing, but you're working for the public assistance. But what happens is on those survey 123s, we take a picture of a gravel road. So when FEMA comes around, they're looking, okay, where is this on the gravel road? And you have no markers, you have no way to go back and show exactly where that is other than a GPS. So what we recommend is the use of SoLocator. It's an app that you can download. And what SoLocator does is it embeds the lat long and embeds the direction you're facing. And it actually gives you an option, if you can see in the bottom of that picture, to put where you're located, the date and the time. And so we actually file those in the cloud. So when FEMA comes back and says, I need to go look at a culvert on Hill Creek Road, I can go and pull up Hill Creek Road, my picture of that in SoLocator, and I know exactly where I'm going. I know exactly where I need to be. That's paid dividends for us as well on past disasters. Another thing that you should do is on your PAs, have your public works employees do damage assessments as they do repairs. If you can have a couple people that are tech savvy that can go out with those crews and before they replace a culvert, they do the damage assessment on the spot, that is excellent because you get exactly the work that's being done. You get exactly the location, and then you don't have to go back and guess about it later. It's already handled before the repair is even completed. If you run into a disaster such as what we've had, you're going to end up with a bunch of VOAG groups in there, and you're going to have volunteer agencies coming from all over the place to assist you. We would strongly suggest that you find one person to be the point of contact for them. That person needs to be the single person that they deal with. And through that, you should create a list of your victims, the type of damage that they have had, and then also what they need, what their recovery efforts are. And then as you can see there, what we did is we would go through and we would know which volunteer group was assigned to that person. So there was no duplication of effort. That way you didn't have 3 different church groups going in to try to fix Susie's house when Susie's already been fixed by one. And you can actually spread the effort out better over that. Keep in mind, you're going to have victim displaced resources. People are going to lose things in a flood. Lost documents, rental agreements, which are very important because when FEMA comes around, that's going to be the first thing they're going to see is a rental agreement. So you need to be able to help those folks work with their landlord to try to get a copy of a rental agreement. Also, they may lose birth certificates. They may lose prescriptions. Those are things that you have to try to help these victims recover. The use of MARC centers, multi-agency resource centers, they can be very advantageous to you when you bring everybody under one roof to try to help with the documents, help with the Department of Insurance, help with those things to help the recovery process along. And then the most important thing is you're going to have to realize that you're going to have to be the one to advocate for your people. We have fought some battles with certain agencies over our folks because of damage assessments being done wrong. Just you can pick it, but you have to be the resource and the advocate for your folks within your community. Housing management, Red Cross, local church groups, those things are going to be coming in and they're going to offer to help you with your displaced persons. Red Cross will be very advantageous to you. However, they do come with some limits. What you will find too, Red Cross's damage assessments will not reflect your damage assessment, and then that causes up a whole bit of problem where Red Cross comes in 3 days later, the water's gone down, they don't see a water line, they say it's minor. Well, when 3 days before it was in 6 feet of water, so it's a major destroyed. So that comes an issue, and you'll have to mitigate and work through that. And just one last thing, the donation management. We learned real quick, be specific in what you ask for. If you're having a disaster and you're trying to get through here, be specific in what you ask for, because you're going to get inundated with water, you're going to get inundated with clothing. One point of distribution may not be enough for you, but you need to make sure that you identify that early on. And once again, be specific in the needs that you request. So you can't plan for everything, but having a plan is everything. If you told me that I would have to figure out a way to take a cow 40 foot out of a tree in our city park, I would have probably told you that you were crazy. However, as you can see, we in fact did have a cow 40 feet in the air in the tree in our city park that we had to deal with. The point of that being is, if you've got a plan, you can adapt. You can make things happen. But if you just go at it from the hip, things can get pretty dicey. So I know that's been real fast. I know it's probably not what you're used to with the Department of Transportation. I know it's probably confusing and sometimes, and maybe you just like thinking, what in the heck is this guy talking about? But that's the things that we learned through this disaster. It kind of gives you a snapshot of it. And I appreciate you letting us present today. So thank you.
It's fascinating. Thanks, Mr. Allen, Mr. Cottle, and Honorable Cottle, Judge Cottle. Let's see. I've got a couple of questions here. It says, was there a hazard mitigation plan in place to help with the flood or the ice storm? I guess that was a yes. Let's see. And then Bernadette says, did the cow live and was it hurt?
Well, unfortunately, the cow is no longer with us. It was that way when we suffered quite a bit of agricultural loss here that not many people know about. We lost a lot of livestock. We lost a lot of pasture land. And so this cow was from a farm that was clearly upriver. It drowned prior to being ever hung in the tree. But we get that question a lot when folks see that picture. Was the cow alive and did it live? And unfortunately, it succumbed to its injuries.
Yeah, I was going to say too, I remember on, I think somebody on Facebook had posted a video of it was like a wagon train of farm trucks and trailers of hay. I thought that was pretty cool. They were traveling, I guess, the surrounding counties, bringing hay and stuff to local farmers there in Lee County. And
we had hay and agricultural relief coming from as far as Michigan. It was an amazing thing to watch. They ran everything at our POD, our point of distribution, and there would be 20 trucks show up and unload hay, and there'd be 20 trucks gone. It was fascinating to watch. If you ever need any help with logistics, ask a farmer, because they've got it figured out.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, thank you guys. Let's see, does anybody else have any questions for these gentlemen? I don't see anything else in the chat box, so thanks again for your time and presenting today. We appreciate it. And I'm recording this presentation, so if anybody wants to look back on it, for the details, they can have this, probably put it online. Okay, let's see. Next on the agenda, we're starting to get in. We got 3 virtual public involvement presentations, and we'll wait on questions probably till the end. I think Chris has a good idea there to just wait till the end of all 3 of them to ask questions and kind of do like a panel discussion. The first one, I'll go ahead and introduce Brad Bottoms. I'm not sure if he was going to be able to make it for this piece, but I think he can make it to the open table. I'll go ahead and read his bio and Gary Sharp's bio. Mr. Brad Bottom started with Kentucky Transportation Cabinet in 2010 in District 5 design before moving to District 4 in 2012 as a design supervisor. He took over as project development branch manager in 2014, and he grew up in Louisville, attended Bradley University in Illinois, and now lives in Campbellsville, Kentucky. Mr. Gary Sharp earned his bachelor's in 1976 and master's in 1978 in civil engineering from the UK. Gary was a scholarship student with the Transportation Cabinet between 73 and 75 and began his engineering career in 76 with the Division of Research at the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. In 1980, the Division of Research was transferred to UK Transportation Research Program, which later became the Kentucky Transportation Center in 86. In 89, Gary returned to the Transportation Cabinet Division of Highway Design. In 2020, Gary was named director of the Division of Highway Design, a position held until his retirement in 2004. Gary joined Palmer Engineering in 2005 as a senior project manager. So please welcome Mr. Brad Bottoms if he made it, and Mr. Gary Sharp.
I don't think Brad's made it. I got a couple of emails from him, but he's going to make it for the
Okay.
for the question and answer session. We hope. Brad's tied up with another meeting
Okay.
right now. Oh, so, but I appreciate it, Jacob. I will try to walk us through this presentation. Can everybody see my screen?
I can.
Okay, good. I'm going to try to give you just an overview of the public involvement process for the US 150 Nelson County improvements between Bardstown and Springfield. I'll give you an overview of the entire public involvement process, but I'm really going to focus on the public hearings at the end because talk about holding a public hearing during COVID-19. Let's see, there we go. The project corridor is, this is, as mentioned, it's between Bardstown and Springfield. You can see one segment, which we weren't involved with, but it's 4-8309. It's actually under construction now. That's the interchange improvements at the Bluegrass Parkway. The public hearing focused, it was for 396.10. That's in yellow. That's between just east of the Bluegrass Parkway to the Washington Nelson County line at the Beech Fork River. And then the 4-396.20 and 30, that's actually part of the overall corridor improvement, but it's in Washington County. The environmental documents, the CE3 being handled by the district and the statewide consultant. The project timeline, this began with a scoping study. Mikhail, you might remember this project, but it started with a scoping study in 2015 for Washington and Nelson counties. It evolved into preliminary engineering. A real short segment, Grundy Home Road in Washington County was a spot improvement, a high crash location, and that advanced into preliminary engineering in 2016. But then the balance of the corridor, Nelson and Washington counties moved into preliminary engineering in 2018. And of course, our goal, we were working toward an environmental assessment for Nelson County, which we actually ended up getting in February 2020. Now, our public meetings were very well attended. You can see we had 170 people attended the public meetings associated with the scoping study in May of 2015. We had 256 people came to the public meetings for the preliminary engineering. Those were in April of 2019. And of course, we ended up getting the environmental assessment was completed February 12th of 2020. The public hearings, when we had the EA completed, we immediately planned to move into a public hearing phase. And we actually had the public hearing scheduled for March 17th of 2020. But about a week beforehand, we had to cancel. So it was canceled because of COVID-19. And I guess, we were hopeful at first that COVID would not be around for very long and that we would be able to reschedule that public hearing sometime, later that summer. Well, obviously that didn't happen. And we at that time began planning for developing a plan for public involvement and public hearings, meeting the COVID-19 meeting protocols. And so we went through several iterations of developing a plan. I think we probably actually had 3 formal iterations that we submitted to the district, and we probably had 6 or so that we did internally before and during that process. And we were following the Kentucky guidance, the CDC guidance. We were looking at all, and as you well know, that was a moving target. So, and we were adapting as the protocols for holding meetings evolved. We ultimately got the KTC approved our plan for public involvement on around October 5th, and then it was submitted to the FHW. Well, it had been to the FHWA earlier. We sent the revisions to them. They came back on October 22nd with approval. Let's go ahead and do so. We had already planned for our advertisement, and it was involved a 2-pronged approach. There was an online public hearing component, and then there was an in-person component. The online component was scheduled for November the 10th, and we had 84 people attend that. We had actually planned for the in-person component on November the 17th, a week later. That didn't happen. We had Nelson County was in the red zone. Their positivity rate kept escalating, so we had to postpone it, and we just kept postponing it until we got to March 16th, 2021, 364 days later. And at that point in time, we had 81 people that signed up to attend that in-person meeting. So we had a total of 165 attendees at the public hearing in both components, but some folks attended both meetings. So we had some duplication of attendees. When we advertised for the online public hearing, we advertised in 3 different newspapers, the Springfield paper, the Bardstown paper, and the Courier Journal. We actually, if anybody had signed up or attended any previous meeting, we mailed them a mailer with the newspaper advertisement, telling them how to access and to join the online public hearing. And what you see here on the left-hand side is actually the screen. So if you clicked on our link, you'd see a box that you could click on to see all the meeting materials that were going to be presented. You could actually click on another link to register for the online participation. And then you could click on another link to do that took you to a Survey Monkey that lets you complete an online questionnaire. We also, where you see attending in person, we gave them specific instructions for a call-in that allowed people to call in to a number, and then we would actually schedule them into a time slot for an in-person by appointment public hearing. I would say this, we were very cognizant of making sure that we presented the same information online as that was presented in person. And we felt that we had to have consistency since we had the 2 different mediums for presenting the public, or handling the public hearing. The only difference is we had about a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation there was about a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation that was in the online version. What we did with the in-person is we had a laptop at each of the stations, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But we had a laptop at each of the stations, and when we brought people in, we asked them, "Did you attend the online public hearing?" If they answer yes or no, we'd say, well, there's a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation. We can play that for you and go through that presentation with you, or we can talk through all the displays individually. We didn't have anybody that actually asked to see the PowerPoint presentation, but we wanted to make sure that they had that option. And then the other types of materials, we went over purpose and needs of the project, a complete overview of the alternatives, a comparison matrix. There was a handout, and I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. And of course, you had the questionnaire. We also offered them the opportunity to make a public statement at the online version. And then we had a Q&A session. The handout, this was something that we mailed this to when we sent out a mailer, we included this handout with every mailer before the online version, before the in-person version. It was also posted online. But what we wanted to do is make sure that we kind of made people aware of what alternatives were evaluated, where they could view the environmental documentation, how to make a public statement. And then we had we actually had a little more detailed description of the alternatives that were actually evaluated. And at the in-person version, well, if it was online, then they could click on the meeting materials and they could zoom in on an alternative, alternative 2A, for example, look at where their property was, and they could get a blow up, a detail of that. At the in-person, we actually had the, the 12-foot long displays at a 200 scale, so they could actually get a up close and personal view of that alternative and how it might affect their properties. We had a comparison matrix that compared the alternatives, very common, and this was the same matrix that was used for both hearings. And we had the questionnaire. We had 68 people completed questionnaires online. 22 of those came after the online hearing, 46 following the in-person hearing. Then we had 23 people that mailed in questionnaires. Actually, just 3 mailed in after the online hearing, but 20 after the in-person. So I think you kind of could see the trend there. If you attended in person, you were a little more intended to follow the traditional path of a public hearing. Now, when we advertised for the in-person public hearing, everything was done with a call in. So they called in. This is the phone number that they called in. Our folks actually would get online and we registered them into a time slot. And that registration occurred beginning prior to the online hearing on November 10th. And it occurred all the way until the day of March 16th. So as people registered, we would periodically send out emails with updates of the rescheduling, and we kept them involved. We also made telephone calls if they didn't give us an email address, or if we didn't, or we would mail them information. We actually tried to use 2 different methods, either email and phone or phone and mail. We tried to make sure everybody was involved. We also offered people the opportunity to do an individual meeting, an individual Zoom meeting, where that we would actually get this. They would tell us what their concerns were. We would zoom in on, develop a detailed blow-up map of where that area was, and do that and talk with them about their concerns. We only had 2 people take us up on that, but we did do 2 individual Zoom meetings in that process. And here you can see the time slots that we identified. We had, what we had is, you can look at the photograph, we had a large gymnasium at the part of the Parkway Baptist Church there in Bardstown. And we were able to petition that gymnasium into 4 quadrants. So with session 1, we would have session 1A, which is in one quadrant, 1B in a second quadrant, 1C, et cetera, to 1D. And then we staggered how people can enter the session. We went through the COVID-19 protocols. We did temperature checks. Everybody had to wear a mask. They also had to complete a health questionnaire. Again, they would call in and schedule an appointment. But you can see with all the sessions that we had lined up, we had 8 people from the public, maximum allowed per session, and we had 2 from the project team. And what we would do is, so we could theoretically accommodate up to 160 people if necessary. And then we were prepared to extend it on to the following the following day if necessary to accommodate. That was one of the questions that the FHWA had with us. So they wanted to make sure that we afforded everyone that had an interest in attending the in-person session, that we afforded them that opportunity. So, and that was why that was something very important. So we were prepared to, if we'd had 200 people sign up, we would have accommodated 200 people. We had about 80 some people that actually signed up for the in-person. The participation, again, total about 165 people, about 20% attended both meetings. We had a few people though that submitted questionnaires that didn't attend either meeting. So you kind of deal with that also. We had 84 people attend the online, again, 25 questionnaires and 5 public statements. Had 81 people attend the March 16th by appointment, in-person by appointment. 66 questionnaires were completed, 46 by the Survey Monkey, 20 by mail. We also had 15 people make statements to a court reporter. Now we could not actually handle doing a public statement in front of your peers because they were coming in on a staggered schedule, but we did afford them the opportunity to make those statements to a court reporter, and then those will be part of the record. And we also, so that they were aware of what public statements had been made at the online version, that we came back and we actually had a display board that just summarized what public statement 1 was a certain amount of information, was this information, this question, public statement 2, etc. So we tried to do as much as we could to make sure that those public statements to the court were public statements to their peers. In terms of observations and lessons learned, I guess we felt like that the online public hearing was well received and well attended. We didn't receive any negative comments. We had a few issues with the Zoom platform where people just had some, weren't able to raise their hand and didn't know how to unmute their mic, etc. But other than that, there were very minor issues. We talked to everybody through that. But you cannot replace an in-person public hearing. There's just some folks that really want to talk to a person face to face. Both Brad and I had people that we had talked to during the course of the year that when they came to the in-person public hearing, they said, "I want to talk to you." They requested us with the sign-in. So we had that happen. And we had some people that just had the technological issues where they either didn't have the technology available or they were technologically challenged and just didn't want to do anything online. But I guess Brad and I had this one observation. We felt like that the in-person by appointment sessions, the way that we handled it was very similar to the way that you would in final design, where that you would have a by appointment right away informational meeting where the property owners would come in and talk to you. And in this instance, you had an hour with up to about 8 people in a session, one-on-one. And whereas with a traditional public hearing, you would have 80 people there and you'd talk to them over a 2-hour period. So with that's all I have. Thank you so very much. And Jacob, we can, I hope I didn't take up too much time. But we
went a little bit long. We've got a little time at the end for some questions. Joe Plunk asked, where was the in-person meeting? We can probably go ahead and answer that one. I guess it was a pretty simple one.
It was at a Parkway Baptist Church in a youth gymnasium.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Let's see. We'll go ahead and intro the next virtual public hearing presentation here. Mr. Chris Kuntz is the KYTC Project Development Branch Manager in District 1 in Paducah. And he's a 97 graduate of the University of Missouri at Rolla and has worked for D1 for 24 years in a variety of roles. Chris has been the branch manager since 2014. He lives in Paducah with his wife, Dina, and children, Abby and Josh. And then tag teaming this one with Miss Rebecca Thompson. Rebecca has been a transportation consultant for 15 years, working primarily on planning and NEPA projects for KYTC. She joined QK4 in 2017, based in their Frankfurt office. So please welcome Mr. Kuntz and Miss Thompson. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I'll try and speed through these since Gary took all my time. The
I can see
project
you.
that
I
we
can see
have
you.
on the project we have on US 60 in Ballard, McCracken County is actually a project that was started 15, 20 years ago as a state funded project. We had American Engineers as our design consultant and had, developed, it was a state funded project. We went through the normal design process, had alternatives, came up with a preferred alternative, and had a public meeting, which I think, is going to be on one of the slides here when we get to that timeline. And then, like a lot of state funded projects did, the project ran out of money, wasn't funded in the 6-year plan. It went into about a 10-year stall where nothing really happened. And then in around the 2018 timeframe, we brought QK4 on board to help us get through the environmental process and try to get an environmental document so that we could utilize federal funds for the project. So, we kind of had to go back in time. Rebecca, if you go to the next slide, I've jokingly, we called it, we had to go back in time because we had already told people that alternative one was our preferred alternate. And then we had to go back and have another round of public meetings 10 years later, where we're showing them another range of alternatives. So that just from a project standpoint was kind of unique. And then Rebecca, if you go to the next slide, our timeline with that, as you can see, as I already mentioned, we did, planning in 2001, had public meetings in 2004, 2006 timeframe, and then basically went dark for about 12 years. In June of 19, we had a in-person public meeting as part of this environmental process. We had got the environmental assessment signed, and with these federal projects that require the environmental assessment and the finding of no significant impact, the feds are, you have to have a public hearing after the completion of the environmental assessment, and the feds are very adamant that public hearing has to be in person. And so, as Gary mentioned, when COVID hit, that took away our ability to have an in-person public hearing. And we, through help with people in central office environmental analysis, there was a lot of negotiating with Federal Highways to get to an agreement on what a virtual hearing with an in-person component would look like. And so that's something that's unique to these projects with the environmental issues. Rebecca's going to step through what we did and how we did it. But, I guess one thing to keep in mind is that if you don't have to have the public hearing because of the federal environmental rules, then you don't have to do any of this in-person stuff that Gary mentioned or Rebecca's getting ready to talk about. You could just have the option. I think Steve DeWitt and Mikhail have done that on a lot of planning projects, of just doing the virtual part and not dealing with the in-person part. We were forced to do that in-person part because of the federal rules for a virtual hearing. So now I'm going to turn it to Rebecca, and she's going to go through what we did with that virtual hearing for this project.
Okay, so we used a similar setup to what Gary was just describing, where we had all of our materials online through a story map, and you can see the link on the screen if you ever want to check it out. And then followed up with a live virtual hearing via the Zoom platform, and then had those one-on-one small group follow-up sessions available as anybody was interested in it. And we were also meeting here in March 2021. Just a quick peek at the story map itself. You can see there on the right side of the screen the kind of information that we included to really step people through the narrative that we went through since the NEPA process started, at least in 2018. I think one of the big influences on this project in particular was that it had been around for a while. The community was aware of it. We'd seen the alternatives before. I mean, there were small tweaks, but it wasn't a lot of new information. So people didn't necessarily have as many upfront questions as we would have gotten had we been starting from an earlier point in the process. We did post the environmental overview, the environmental assessment online, as well as any of the displays that we had showed at that 2019 in-person public meeting that looked at the other alternatives. And then at the bottom, we had lots of different ways to comment, whether it was an email or a survey or a phone number you could call and just talk to me, for those of the folks that were perhaps a little less internet savvy than what most of us have turned into after 2020. Just trying to make sure that it was really accessible for everybody who had any interest in the project. So similar to what Gary was saying, we did put out the traditional legal ads that you would be required to have for a public hearing, as well as Keith coordinated an extensive social media campaign. It was really good about getting the media engaged. So we just had amazing press coverage to make sure that everybody was aware that, hey, there's a virtual Zoom call you can join on, or if you want to talk to us in person, you can call, you can set up a follow-up, all that kind of stuff to really get the word out there. And then in addition, we did the direct mailing postcards, like he was saying, using that every door direct mailing feature that the post office offers. It was about 2,000 individuals along the different postal routes covering the project corridor, as well as anybody that had attended that 2019 meeting, even if they were beyond the range of the project itself. So then the short version of the results, we had about 1,100 people check out the website in that 2 months there around the Zoom call itself. We had 77 people registered to attend the Zoom call, but only about 38 showed up in person, or showed up virtually in person over the call itself. And then we got requests from 3 different representatives, whether it was all property owners along the preferred alternative who really just wanted to talk about specific driveways, connections, access, noise, that kind of stuff. Again, I think being further along in the process and not having a lot of new alternatives was probably a contributing factor to those relatively lower numbers than the 160, 150 Gary was talking about. So just some key takeaways as we were talking about or looking through our process and trying to evaluate afterwards, kind of the lessons learned. Certainly we want to make sure that anything we're doing is accessible, making sure that we have the call-in option and the postcards and other ways to engage for audiences that aren't perhaps as internet minded, to make sure that like the low income and the elderly and some of those other sensitive population groups along the project had equal opportunities to be engaged. We definitely ended up mailing paper copies of the story map out to some people who just don't quite trust that Wi-Fi thing yet. One of the things we were also really intentional about was trying to be consistent in our messaging, using that same story map, whether we were talking through it on the virtual call or sending out materials, just being sure that it was really open and transparent, that what you see online is the exact same thing we're presenting to. There weren't any extra surprises or tweaks. And then also, as I'm sure you've heard by now, practice makes perfect, just to try and test it out, make sure everybody had their audio visual connections on, make sure everybody knew how to mute and unmute and all that good stuff. One of the important parts was to designate co-hosts in case your Wi-Fi does something wonky while you're supposed to be giving your 2-minute speech. And then one of the other things we're really intentional about was trying to blend in more presenters than we would have necessarily done in an in-person meeting, so that you're not just sitting there listening to a talking head for terribly, terribly long. So that's all I've got on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Chris. Let's see, I don't see any questions right out. Excuse me, but we'll go ahead and have George come in. And yes, do you guys still hear me? Did I lose you guys? Can you hear me? Okay, so let's see. George Phelps graduated from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale in 2004 with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. He began his KYTC career in December of 2006 in District 2's design section and continues to work in that section as a design engineer and project manager. He also serves on Keene's statewide board and is District 2's Keene coordinator. We're here in District 2, the Keene's Most Outstanding District Award. George and his wife, Brittany, who is a District 2 right away, lives in Sabree with their 3 kids, Ava, Hannah, and Isaac, and Cat Samuel L. Katzen. So please welcome Mr. George Phelps. I think Rebecca may end up helping with this one too, but please welcome George. Go ahead, George.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Yeah, I was gonna have
Very good.
Rebecca go ahead and start the presentation to kind of talk about a little bit of the history of the project. I'm gonna share my screen here. Let's see. There you go. Everybody see those?
I don't see it yet. There's
Oh, hang on a second.
a little,
How about that?
yeah, there you go. Okay, now I can,
All right, yes, I'll have Rebecca start and talk about the actual project itself here in Christian County on Kentucky 115.
All right, so this is just one of a zillion narrow 2-lane roads throughout rural Kentucky. This one in particular runs through Christian County, about 10 miles south and east of Hopkinsville, and provides a connection between I-24 up to the community of Pembroke. In those two itty bitty teeny tiny lanes, you get a mix of traffic with trucks, you get farm equipment and cars and bikes and Amish buggies, all just kind of doing their thing in a very, very constricted space with very room for recovery. So this certainly jumped out as a priority based on crash data, as well as based on some of the proposed industrial developments up in the community itself. It carries about around 3,000 vehicles per day. And then at the north end, as you're coming up into town, there's an at-grade railroad tracks, and 115 ends at an intersection with 41 that's got really tight turning radio, so that trucks that are trying to travel between the industrial parks and the interstates are jogging over into the adjacent lanes and jockeying and moving people back and forth and whatnot. So there was a planning study conducted in 2016, 2017 that looked at existing conditions and tried to gather some community input on the initial range of solutions that looked at widening the 115 corridor. It looked at spot improvements, including redoing that intersection there in downtown to get the truck movements, trucks flowing better through there, and then looking at some off alignment options, as you can see in that wide part of the study area there west of town, to do a grade separated rail crossing and kind of a connector around outside of the more historic downtown area. If you'll jump to the next slide for me. So this has got the build alternatives we looked at shown at the top that moved into the NEPA process. The red line is that widening along 115, and then there were 2 industrial connectors, not bypass as you'll note, that really tried to divert trucks around that tight intersection downtown, as well as get them over the railroad without having to stop and introduce those conflict points. The lower half of the screen highlights that project development timeline, starting with the planning study. We had 2 outreach efforts in there focused on local officials as well as a public meeting. That community engagement really highlighted strong support for the project. About 93% of the public surveys we received agreed that 115 should be widened, and about 70% were supporting a off alignment connector there around Pembroke. So the planning study transitioned into the preliminary design and NEPA efforts in 2018, working towards a CE3 in this case, which would not require a hearing like the first 2 projects we talked about. We had some of our environmental survey crews in the field throughout 2019, so they were a little more visible, but we were doing mostly that in-house work, trying to position ourselves to reach out to the public again in early 2020, like everybody else, right? Obviously it's not part of the project development processes, but this corridor was one of the ones selected to apply for a build grant there in summer of 2019, which really kind of helped engage the local officials again simultaneously and just kind of keep it at the forefront of their interest. Through that process, we got about 54 letters of support from different state and local representatives, which really, I think, while it didn't necessarily inform the decision-making process, was still good to keep it in the forefront of everybody's mind, particularly while we're kind of in a lull on the public engagement side. And then George is about to talk to us about the November 2020 measures that we launched to try and engage with our stakeholders and the public again on the preferred alternative.
Yeah, in this project, we had some kind of unique challenges with COVID because we didn't have the ability to have a lot of in-person activities. So it's like, how do we engage the public, get them all the information that they need to know about the project, and have it all done virtually? or so that they have everything they need to know to talk about. So we used basically a lot of virtual stuff. We did the press release. We put the press release on Facebook. We had a local officials virtual meeting to help the local officials get the information, get it out to the public that they know. Rebecca even created a project website. You see the links listed there. Had the story map on there on the website, as you can see. If you all can see it, can you all see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Yeah, it basically showed you the purpose and need. As you went through there, it gave you all the information about the project, gave you some pictures to look at just so you can kind of see what the road looked like, what we're trying to fix. All the different, no shoulders, not very wide roads, a lot of traffic. Gives you a history, and you even had a virtual interactive map so that people could actually come in, click on the map, which is showing the area. You can zoom into wherever you lived at to kind of see what we were planning on doing right there locally with your area. And so they could basically just go in there, take a look and see the entire project and what it's going to do. Give you an idea of our footprint of widening the roads, giving some wide shoulders, because like Rebecca said, we had a lot of Amish on this road. Basically 2 huge communities that use this frequently. When you're on this road, you're bound to see at least 4 or 5 buggies within an hour going up and down it. So we gave them an idea of what was going to be put out there for them. A video of our bridge. We're going to go over top of the railroad instead of having it at grade, which everyone seemed to love because emergency vehicles and departments could get across the railroad and not have to wait for trains. And toward the bottom, we had who you could contact for more information. We also had a link to a survey for everybody to take for comments. So with all that, we figured, okay, that should get out a lot of information to the public. But because we had a couple of large Amish communities in this area, it was like, okay, how do we get information to them? Because they don't really have the ability to get to this information virtually. So how are we going to get it to them so that they know what's going on? I had several phone conversations and some virtual meetings with Steve DeWitt to try to pick his brain about virtual meetings. As everybody knows, he wrote the manual on virtual public involvement. So me and him talked several times on what can we do to help get information to the Amish community. A couple ideas that we had, we used the USPS direct mailer. This here is a picture of what was sent out. The consultant created this. It was American, and I'm sure Rebecca had something to do with this too, to help fix this and put this all together. When we contacted, because we didn't really know a lot about the direct mailer. So when we contacted the USPS, they informed us that we had to create the mailer, the postcard that they would send out. And of course, we wanted just to send it to the people who live on the corridor. But as this direct mailer works, you actually pick postal routes, and then everybody on the postal routes, whether they live in the corridor or not, gets this mailer. So we had 2 different postal routes that covered this corridor. So we had to send out 800 of these direct mailers to the public. Being that I didn't really know how the Amish community worked with having postal addresses, I wasn't sure that this mailer would get to everyone. So we wanted to make sure we had plenty of information out there to just kind of throw a wide net of information to get this out there to the public. And another idea that we came up with was have some variable message boards out on either end of the project, so that if there was somebody in the Amish community who didn't get the mailer, they might see the message boards, which, they of course have limited amounts of text you can put on there. So we just had new road project for info, call, and we had the district office phone number, where those phone numbers would actually be forwarded to me so that I could talk to whoever's calling in. We got people from the public. Luckily, we even got several members of the Amish community who called in because they knew somebody, I guess, who had a phone that they could use. I talked to them. We had some that sent me letters commenting, so they got the mailers. Some of them just saw the message boards. They didn't get the mailers. But I made sure that we gave them information. When I talked to them in the Amish community, we made sure that we sent out packets of information. I think Rebecca sent those out to them to make sure that they got the same information that was on the website, that was in this mailer. I even asked them when I talked to them if they could spread that around in their community. We sent them several surveys that they could hand out as well with the information they were giving. So we got several of those, I think, returned to us as well. So I think all in all, with COVID, trying to reach a community that doesn't usually have any virtual access, I think we did a pretty good job of making sure everyone in the community and in this corridor got the information they needed to be able to make comments. We were able to receive back 145 completed surveys. And of course, we had some letters that was sent in as well. This is just our results of all the virtual we've done, the stakeholders meeting, everything that we've done to try to get the Amish community and the public to comment. So I think 145 surveys is pretty good for commenting. We have a couple of the questions that was on there to kind of see where the community's preference was on what we were doing. With our tentative schedule so far coming out, we're going to begin phase 2 design on this project probably in the next couple of weeks. We should have advanced right-of-way plans hopefully by October of this year, then possibly have a joint inspection meeting in November, and then finally have some final plans in March of 2023. So with that, there's kind of what we've done to try to get the information out there. Like Rebecca said, we didn't have to have any in-person, so we did everything virtually. And it was unique trying to make sure that we got information to the Amish. And I think we did a successful job in contacting them and getting their thoughts and opinions.
Yeah, thanks, George and Rebecca. Okay, let's see, it's 10:47. So I guess the remaining time here, at least open up a couple minutes. Does anybody have any questions about, I guess, maybe virtual meetings you're planning to do, or questions that you have about virtual public involvement in your area, or I guess any questions in general for these guys? The one was in District 4. First one was with Gary Sharp and Brad Bottoms, and then the second was in District 1, Chris Coons, Rebecca Thompson, and the last one's in District 2. So they're all kind of Western Kentucky projects. See, I don't see anybody have any questions. So that was easy. That was easy unless somebody comes up with something they want to know. Some of the survey feedback last time that prompted this was basically it was COVID. You know, people were curious how things are going. What are some example projects that we've had during this COVID stuff? And the more of these experiences we can share, it just gives everybody a little more confidence that you're not doing it alone. So these three projects are good resources. People that have gone through it and some of the results and stories that they had from it. Let's see. I'll give it a few more minutes. I guess if anybody wants to ask a question on these, I'll go ahead and read on the agenda, I put some announcements and some personnel updates on there, so you guys can read those as you have time. But after this meeting, the MPOs, I believe, are going to meet with Thomas Witt on Blue Jeans from 1:30. And then the districts are going to meet probably 1:30 to 3 with Jason Blackburn on a Teams meeting. So those, I guess you guys probably already got invites for those separately for people that are going to attend those. And then the next meeting, the next one of these will be in July. Did somebody ask me a question?
Jacob, this is Thomas Witt. Yes. Sorry, the MPO
Hey,
meeting
Thomas.
actually starts at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, okay. So
Thanks.
1 to 3.
Yeah, 1 o'clock.
Okay. Let's see, next one of these statewide meetings is going to be in July. I'll send out a survey like we did last time. So that drive has a pretty good influence on the topics that we picked. So we want to hear what you guys are interested in. And then other than that, it's mainly developments that have come along in division planning, highlights things we've accomplished. See personnel updates, Tanya Higdon, location engineer in design now. Amanda Desmond as well, and Carl Sawyer. Sadie Middleton's going to be helping out with the MPO team for some Tanya's duties. And I'll be helping with the long range plan. I think that project, it's in advertisement right now, so we're going to be updating our long range statewide transportation plan this year. I think 18 months is the contract. So we'll see how that process goes, see who we end up selecting for that. To help us. And Jay Balaji's now heading up the forecast modeling team. Scott Thompson's the branch manager for the multimodal programs. And Tracy Novachnik is the assistant state highway engineer for project delivery and preservation now. And the district's Kevin Blaine is a planning section supervisor in District 4. Jared Clemens, utility section supervisor. Charles Allen retired and went to Hardin County. He's a Hardin County engineer now. Quentin Smith left to join DLZ. FHWA Nick Lombardi is the new division structural engineer. And Leslie Barnes, the new civil rights program coordinator. And the ads and MPOs, really the only update I had there was Max Conyers. He's not at Lexington MPO anymore, but Kenzie Gleason's filling in for the Max's role there. And that's all that I have for announcements. I don't see any other questions coming in, so panel discussion is easy. Let's see. Sincerely, thank you to all our speakers for your time, your efforts, and your materials. Thanks to all the audience for your time and attention in cyber world. I'll stay on here for a little bit longer. If anybody has any other questions about the process or topics for next time. And otherwise, be safe, stay well, and have a great rest of the day. See you guys.